Weddings are supposed to be about family, about unity, about love. But at my son's wedding, I felt like a shadow. Guests passed me by, relatives barely nodded, and even at my own child's celebration, I was treated as if I didn't exist. I sat quietly at the back, smiling through the sting, watching the joy unfold without me. But when the $15,000 bill for that grand reception landed on the table, silence swept the room. And suddenly the invisible mother became the only person they could see. I had looked forward to my son's wedding for months. I imagined being part of the planning, helping with details, maybe even sharing a dance with him when the music played. Instead, I found myself on the sidelines. From the moment I arrived at the venue, I knew my place, on the margins. My son's new in-laws bustled about, directing everything as if they alone were hosting. My ex-husband strutted with his new wife, beaming as though I were nothing more than a distant relative. I took my seat quietly, clutching the small bouquet I had bought myself because no one had thought to include me in the floral arrangements. I smiled when people glanced my way, but most didn't stop. The photographer snapped endless pictures, yet somehow I wasn't in any of them. When the ceremony ended and the reception began, I found myself at a table near the back, sandwiched between distant cousins who barely knew me. The laughter, the toast, the spotlight, it all revolved around everyone else. I tried not to mind. After all, it was my son's day, not mine. Still, it hurt. To be his mother, the one who raised him, only to feel invisible on the biggest day of his life, that pain doesn't slip away with a polite smile. Dinner was extravagant, crystal glasses, fine wine, plates served like artwork. I picked at the food, my appetite dulled by the heaviness in my chest. Around me, people talked and laughed, not even noticing my silence. But then, as the night wore on and the last dance ended, reality arrived. A waiter placed a leather folder on the head table. My son opened it and his face drained of color. He whispered to his bride, then to her parents. The whispers turned into a hush, and soon the entire table leaned in, eyes wide. I could see the number written across the bill, $15,000. The chatter died instantly. Guests began gathering their things, pretending not to notice. The joy of the evening evaporated into tension that crackled like static. And then, as if pulled by an invisible thread, every head turned toward me. The woman they had ignored all night suddenly became the center of the story. The silence in the hall was deafening. Just moments earlier, people had been clinking glasses and laughing. Now the only sound was the rustle of the leather folder being slid back and forth across the table like it was radioactive. My son whispered urgently to his bride. Her parents leaned in, frowning. My ex-husband adjusted his tie, his new wife pursing her lips as though the number offended her personally. "This can't be right," someone muttered. $15,000 for one night? But the waiter stood firm. "Yes, sir. That's the total for food, drinks, service, and the venue. Payment is required before close." A murmur rippled through the head table. The bride's parents glanced at each other. My ex cleared his throat. "Well, we already covered the flowers and part of the band. I wasn't aware I'd be responsible for this." Her father bristled. "Excuse me? We paid for the photographer and decorations. We're not covering this." The tension grew sharper, bouncing back and forth like a tennis match. People began gathering coats, whispering nervously, pretending not to hear. But all of us at the back could see what was happening. Finally, my son looked up, his face pale. His eyes scanned the room, darting past his in-laws, past his father, and landing on me. The irony stung. I had been invisible all night, until the bill came due. "Mom," he said softly, almost pleading, "could you help?" Every eye followed his gaze. The family who hadn't spoken to me all evening now stared like I was the solution they'd been waiting for. For a moment, I just sat there, feeling the weight of all those eyes, my cardigan, my quiet presence, the chair they'd tucked away at the back. It all came rushing into focus. I stood slowly, steadying myself. "Why me?" My voice carried further than I expected, reaching the edges of the room. A hush fell. My son stammered, "Because you're responsible." "You've always been the one to fix things." I let out a humorless laugh. "Responsible enough to raise you, to work 2 jobs so you could get through school, to stand alone when no one else showed up. Responsible enough to sit here tonight, ignored, invisible, until money entered the picture." Whispers stirred around the hall. My ex shifted uncomfortably. The bride's parents stared at their laps. I continued, my voice stronger now. You want me to pay the bill? To cover $15,000 for a night where I wasn't even part of the celebration? Tell me, why should I? The silence was thick. My son looked stricken, torn between shame and desperation. His bride's eyes welled with tears. The waiter cleared his throat softly. I'll need an answer soon. And there it was, the moment where the ignored mother held the power no one had expected, because sometimes the person you overlook is the one holding the only card that matters when the bill comes due. I could feel the weight of the room pressing in on me, my son's pleading eyes, my ex-husband's clenched jaw, the in-laws shifting in their seats, hoping I would save them from the embarrassment. But I had been silent too long. I took a deep breath and spoke clearly so no one could pretend not to hear. You mocked me for years. For my plain clothes, for my simple ways. Tonight you push me aside as though I didn't exist. And now when the bill comes, suddenly I'm the only one who matters? A cousin near the back coughed nervously. The bride's mother fidgeted with her necklace. My ex muttered under his breath, but not loud enough to challenge me. I pulled a small envelope from my purse. The same purse they had called cheap earlier in the evening. I laid it flat on the table. Inside this envelope is a check. Big enough to cover the entire bill, gasps spread through the hall. Eyes widened. My son leaned forward, his hand shaking as he reached for it. But, I said firmly, pulling it back before he could touch it, this check comes with truth attached. Tonight has shown me what I mean to you, not in words, not in smiles, but in silence. And silence speaks loudly. You didn't see me as a mother, or even a guest. You saw me as someone to ignore, until you needed me to pay. My son's face flushed with shame. His bride looked down, tears spilling onto her dress. I opened the envelope slowly and slid the check halfway out so the number was visible. $15,000. I could pay this right now, but I won't, at least not without you hearing me first. A murmur rippled across the hall. Some nodded, others shifted uncomfortably. I turned to my son, my voice softer but steady. I raised you to value people, not appearances. To never measure worth by clothes or money. But tonight, I saw how quickly I was forgotten. If you want me to cover this bill, then understand this. It won't be out of obligation. It will be out of choice. And only if you promise never again to treat me, or anyone, with the kind of disregard you showed tonight. He swallowed hard, tears pooling in his eyes. Mom, I'm sorry. I really am. I didn't see it. I didn't see you. But I do now. The sincerity in his voice silenced the room more than my speech had. I nodded slowly. Then consider this check my gift. Not for the wedding, but for the lesson. I placed it firmly into his hand. The relief on his face was immediate, but the shame lingered. The in-laws whispered thanks, their voices trembling. My ex said nothing at all. As the waiter collected the payment, I stood tall. For the first time that night, I wasn't invisible. I was undeniable. Because sometimes the power isn't in the money itself. It's in reminding people who really holds it. After that night, the story of the $15,000 bill spread through the family like wildfire. People whispered about it at Sunday dinners, cousins brought it up on phone calls, and even distant relatives sent messages. Some couldn't believe I had written the check. Others couldn't believe I had spoken up. But one thing was certain, they no longer saw me the same way. A week later, my son and his new wife came to my house. They didn't arrive in suits or dresses, just in simple clothes, holding a small cake with "Happy Belated Birthday, Mom" written across it. My son's voice cracked as he said, "We should have celebrated you that night. We didn't. We're sorry." For the first time in a long time, I believed his words. He stayed longer than usual, helped me with chores, even asked about my stories from when he was a boy, stories he had brushed aside before. The in-laws changed too. They called me more often, not to ask for money, but to invite me to lunch, to check in on my health. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was respect, but either way, the silence that once surrounded me had lifted. Even my ex, stubborn as he was, sent a short message. Just 3 words, "You were right." It wasn't reconciliation, but it was acknowledgement. And sometimes acknowledgement is enough. I didn't change my wardrobe. I didn't start wearing expensive clothes to prove a point. I still wore my plain cardigan, still carried the same old purse. But now, when I walked into a room, no one dared laugh. Their eyes lingered differently, not with mockery, but with the memory of the night I held the room in my hands. And for me, the $15,000 wasn't about generosity. It was about reclaiming dignity, about showing them that respect should never be tied to appearances, but to the quiet strength of a life lived with purpose. Sometimes it takes a bill to reveal the real balance of things. Not in dollars, but in respect. I gave them a wedding gift that night, yes. But the greater gift was the lesson they'll never forget. Ignore someone at your own risk, because the person you dismiss today may be the one holding tomorrow's solution. And as for me, I walked away lighter, freer, and finally seen. Not because of the check I wrote, but because I made them remember who I was all along, his mother, their equal, and a woman who would not stay invisible. In the end, the wedding wasn't remembered for the flowers or the music. It was remembered for the $15,000 bill and the lesson it carried. They had ignored me all evening, but when the weight of responsibility appeared, suddenly I was the only one they saw. It wasn't about the money. It was about dignity, about reminding them that respect should never depend on appearances. And sometimes the greatest statement you can make is not with anger, but with action. So let me ask you, have you ever been overlooked or dismissed by family only to prove your worth in an unexpected way? How did it change the way they treated you afterward? Share your story in the comments. And stay with us for more tales where respect and justice finally take their place at the table.